Hello and good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, it's afternoon. I think my body has finally changed to Japan time. Thank you so much for inviting me to come join you today. It has been a pleasure to experience Japan. It is my first time here, and I've enjoyed your country very much. And to speak with experts and colleagues at different institutions and learn different perspectives about how we are doing similar work. Emmy presented this as you want to learn from me, but I feel very strongly that I also have a lot to learn from you. So thank you very much. So the first talk today is about that institutional level collaboration that Emmy had talked about. Again, my apologies that Sarah was unable to join us. Fortunately, she and I look a lot alike, so you can pretend that I am Sarah Wright for this next hour, okay? Sarah has been at the university just a little bit longer than I have. Okay, I wanted to introduce you first to my institution. So Cornell University is in Ithaca, New York. New York is in the northeastern part of the United States. And if you zoom in on New York, that yellow dot right in the middle is Ithaca. And as you can see, Ithaca sits at the end of a very long, very deep glacial lake. It is central to who we are and what we do. Like here, the connection to the water in Ithaca is very important to us. The university was founded in 1865, and we are in a very unique situation in the United States in that we have both private colleges and publicly funded colleges within the same institution. Technically speaking, it is all private. However, we receive and manage funds by the state to run some of the colleges. We have 9 undergraduate colleges within the university and an additional 4 graduate or professional schools. So these are things like our veterinary medicine school, our School of Medicine, which has 2 campuses, one in New York City and one in Qatar. We have a total of about 26, almost 27,000 students, and about 300 faculty together across all of the campuses. If we look then at the library that I am lucky enough to work at, we have, it is built of 20 different, what we call unit libraries. They tend to be centered around disciplines. So for example, I mentioned that we have a veterinary school. We have a veterinary library, chemistry library, business library, industrial and labor relations, etc. The library also has several what we call central units, and these are groups of people who are specifically tasked with supporting the entire university, regardless of what discipline that research or those students are from. And that's part of how my group functions. The Research Data and Open Scholarship group is a central group. The library has over 8.5 million volumes of printed books, 2.5 million electronic books, and many, many physical serials titles. Although the numbers of those are dropping, we are obviously getting more and more electronic titles. I have an asterisk next to our budget number right there of 16.7 million. That is what we had been historically at. The university right now, like many universities in the United States, are going through a pretty severe change in our budgets. and we've been asked to make drastic cuts in the library budgets. And we are in the process of doing that right now. I expect that when I get home to Ithaca, I will have news of how those budgets will impact us. I know that our collections budget is taking the brunt of what the library budget cut will be. It's unfortunate. The collection is what makes our library. However, also the people make our library. And it's really hard to provide services without the people. So we'll see whether the budget cuts also impact staffing. My fingers are crossed that it will not impact us too much. These pictures are of two of our libraries. The one on the left is one of the oldest libraries on our campus. We call this the Harry Potter room. The one on the right is our art, architecture, and planning library. It's one of our newest libraries, and all the stacks are hanging from the ceiling. It's a really beautiful design, and there's a lot of light with, of course, special windows to prevent UV damage to the materials. You are going to be listening to me talk for a long time, so I thought you might want to know just a little about me. I studied at Boston University and at San Diego State University, so all the way in the northeast of the United States and all the way in the southwest of the United States. I also lived in Florida in the southeast, and my husband is from Oregon in the northwest. So my life has touched all four corners of the United States. I started working at Cornell in 2011 after I worked as a research associate at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. That's why I lived in San Diego. In that time, for about 18 years, I studied the little guys in the upper right corner. These are phytoplankton. They're single-celled plants. And my specific area was to study polar phytoplankton, so the plankton that lived at the North Pole and at the South Pole. And I spent 15 years going back and forth to Antarctica doing my research. Some of the time we worked off of the big boats. The picture on the left is me deploying a light sensor off the back of a ship. Sometimes we took water samples off of small boats. The second picture is me and my team collecting water. We went out twice a week from station and collected water so that we could watch the growth and changes in the phytoplankton over the Antarctic summer season. I was lucky enough to work with penguin researchers. You can see me smiling behind the penguins there. And I also am lucky enough to say that I met my husband in Antarctica. And this is my husband and my son after they recently finished a kayak trip up one length of one of the lakes and across a canal and all the way back down to the southern end of another lake at the end of this summer. So that is a little bit about me. But what I'm here to talk to you about is a group that Cornell University has called Cornell Data Services. And Cornell is a collaborative effort to provide a broad range of research data services across the institution by multiple support units. We were tasked with assisting people in both creating their data management plan, but also putting it into practice. So not just writing it down, but actually doing the data management plan. And teaching best practices around how to manage data and find data-related services, regardless of where a researcher is in their process. We know that researchers don't tend to think about the whole process at once. They tend to worry about where they are right then. I need to write this proposal. I need to find the data or collect the data. I need to analyze the data, or I need to share the data because I'm getting a paper out. And we need to be able to help them at that point that they need help. So you could work with we work with the same faculty member multiple times throughout that life cycle. It's not just one time that they visit us or that they need help. So Cornell Data Services started because the university recognized that science scholarship needs proper management or we lose control of it. The university funded a project for 2 years to take a look at what infrastructure needs, what technology needs were at our campus in order to support our faculty. And the result of that was to form an ongoing group. And at the time, we were called the Research Data Management Service Group, RDMSG, which not a single person on our campus could ever remember. But that was the name of our group. So we were formed with the Center for Advanced Computing, that's CAC, that's our High Performance Computing Center, the Cornell University Library, that's where I work, and the Cornell, what was known at the time as Cornell Institute for Social and Economic Research. They've been rebranded since then. So the RDMSG formed in 2010. Right about that same time, the National Science Foundation, one of the United States' biggest science funders, announced they were going to start requiring data management plans within proposals for funding. And that happened in 2011. So CDS then was tasked with those two major support issues. One, keeping track of what our faculty needs were as a carry-on of that original 2008 grant. And two, to help people with this new requirement to write data management plans. In 2023, another big US funder, the National Institutes of Health, also updated their data sharing requirements. Between those two funders, that is the majority of the funded research at Cornell. Probably 75% is funded by those two agencies. And so there was a big need to help our researchers meet those requirements. In 2023, we shortened our acronym from RDMSG to CDS and became Cornell Data Services. We didn't change anything other than the branding, but the letters are easier for people to remember. So I wanted to give you an idea of how this group is structured. I mentioned already that we have support from the university administration, and we call this sponsorship. That's the top level there. And we have three main sponsors of CDS. That is the library, CUL, our Office of Research and Innovation. So this is the highest level office under our provost for supporting the research side of work at Cornell. So like your institution, we have a research obligation, but also an education obligation. And the Office of Research and Innovation is that research side of what happens at our university. And our third sponsor is the university's information technology, which we call IT at Cornell. Underneath that, we've established a three-pronged level of supervision or leadership. I actually sit in the middle as coordinator of this group, and I work very closely with a group that we call our Management Council, and that is the leaders of all the different service providers on campus that support research data in any way. So the directors of each of these groups participate in our management council. And we also have a faculty advisory board. So we don't just want the practical side of how to provide services, but we ask for guidance from what our faculty need in a very formal way through that faculty advisory board. I mentioned some of these groups already. A couple that I haven't specifically called out is the medical school. I mentioned that we have a medical campus in New York City. So the medical campus in many ways is separate from the Ithaca campus organizationally, but when it comes to the actual infrastructure that they need to do their work, we're trying to bring those two sides together and unify how we provide services across the medical campus and the Ithaca campus. We also have a Center for Biotechnology, that's down in the bottom, the middle there, and they provide high performance computing specifically to support our life sciences group. Then in the middle, organizationally, we have where the work actually happens. And this is in 3 groups of people. Everyone that is a participant in RDMSG, we consider a consultant. These are people who are willing to give their time to help faculty answer their questions, work with them through problems. A subset of the consultants group also make a point to create content to advertise the existence of CDS. That is our outreach group. And we also maintain a website, which I'm going to show you more about later. And there's a subset of the consultants that creates content and maintains the information on our website. This is just another way of looking at that last page. That last page was very linear, right? You have leadership up here, and you have the service units, and you have the people. But in reality, it's more like this. We want to be a hub, a central location where people can go on campus. Even if they don't know exactly what they need or who on campus provides that service, they can come to CDS and we can help them find what they need on campus. So I like this image of a hub much better. And really, at our core, we are people. We talked about this a little bit earlier. And I know these faces don't mean anything to you, but they mean a lot to me, and I need to give all these people credit for the work that they do to make CDS happen. You can see that we have a wide variety of expertise that we each bring and share with one another. Oh, and in the upper right corner, that's Sarah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how it is that we try to think about setting up a collaborative organization like this. And I think there are 3 prongs. 3 prongs have been described as being very important when you support these organizations. So you need to have structures that are based on trust. You have structures that are tools-based, very practical ways to implement workflows. But you also have to have administrative structure in there. And all 3 of these pieces have to exist organizationally in order to support for the long term these collaborative efforts. So I wanted to mention just a few of the things that we do in each of those areas. And I apologize if anyone is colorblind. I realized that I color-coded this. So this is orange. These are the tools-based structures that we have in CDS. So for example, all of those people on that last slide, they volunteer their time. They have full-time positions at the university, and they have agreed to contribute time to CDS. They don't get paid extra to do it. So that's really important. We all are contributing because we want to be there. And we bring that group of people together at least once a month, and we share experiences and expertise enough that we know what the other person is doing. Remember I mentioned it was a hub. If we don't know, if I in the library don't know what services our Center for Advanced Computing offers, I can't point the right people there, and vice versa. The people at CAC have to know, oh, I know that the library can help you with that. And then they can point people to us in the library. So that is very important. We do have a code of conduct. I mentioned that we are volunteers. So we have expectations clearly laid out that the consultants must meet. And primarily, this is around how quickly we respond and whether, and the expectations for privacy. So we have agreed that we don't share people's names who come to us for help, but we can share experiences across the network. So I can tell a story about a consultation that I did as long as I don't share the person's name, unless I get permission. I already mentioned that we have this governance advisory board, the management council, and a faculty advisory board. So that's another structure that keeps us aligned. And then we have some tools that help us too. We have a ticketing system. So people email a single address, regardless of where they need to get help. And we take a look at what the questions are and triage those to the right service provider. We have email lists for internal communications. So if a university policy changes or a federal policy changes, we have a mechanism to easily communicate within the consultants group. And we also have a means for external communication. We have a monthly newsletter, and we have that website that I already mentioned. So I want to introduce you to a little bit to each of the spokes on the wheel. The Biotechnology Resource Center is that group that helps our life scientists. And I apologize, this slide is a little busy, but basically investigators in the life sciences have access to 80 computing services and up to 12 terabytes of short-term local storage through the Biotechnology Resource Center. They have data analysis tools on those platforms, and they can scale those storage and those analysis needs up to a petabyte of storage. They are allowed to collaborate on those platforms with other people using a number of tools, including a tool called Globus. Are you all familiar with what Globus does for high performance computing? Globus is a transfer mechanism for handling large data sets. So have you ever emailed a file or tried to move a file on your system, and you walk away from your computer to go do something, and you come back and your computer had run out of battery or decided it needed to do an update or any other reason disconnected from the internet? And you had spent all that time trying to move those files around, and it just got cut off. Globus has the ability to pick up those transfers when they get interrupted. So it's very, very important for people who are moving big data around to have Globus access. And again, I'm sorry that it's sideways. There wasn't any place else to put it on this slide, but the associate director of the Biotechnology Resource Center is part of CDS. I'm going to talk a lot more about library services in another talk, but I wanted to give you a taste of what we do in the library. We already mentioned that I'm a part of the Research Data and Open Scholarship Group. That, as Emmy said, was very specifically named Open Scholarship and not Open Science, because we support, remember I said we support everyone in the university, and humanists and social scientists have data too, but sometimes they don't think they have data. They don't necessarily call the work that they do data management. So we wanted to be sure to be inclusive of those who don't consider themselves scientists, but still want to share their scholarship in an open way. There's another group in our library called Digital Scholarship Services. They also support the digital humanities and geospatial sciences. And we have a very big group of liaisons in our libraries who have specific, discipline-specific skills that are applicable to working with data, and we depend on them heavily too. So some of the things that we support specifically within the library are data management planning, the discovery and acquisition of secondary data, especially Digital Scholarship Services supports data and text analysis in particular, and processing. We support data and code sharing and preservation, and we do a lot of instruction in the library. There are 13 liaisons that contribute to Cornell Data Services, including myself, who also serves as the coordinator. I want to talk just a little bit more about one of those bullets, and again, there'll be a future talk that will go into more detail, but I wanted to dig into the data sharing support that the library offers. You can see on the right a screenshot of a data set that is in our institutional repository, and you can see that it says it's V4, version 4. Our institutional platform supports versioning of data, which allows people to revise their outputs. But if someone had cited an earlier version, that version still remains available on our repository. And the curators in the library, in my group, help do that by supporting this service where we go in and determine what needs to be done to the data to make it more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Whoa. Well, this is not how this slide is supposed to look. You, I think, have it correct on the printout. So I'll see if I can remember what it looks like. So this is supposed to be about our Center for Advanced Computing. So this is our high performance computing center. It works together with our life sciences support. And they offer a broad range of services, local on-premises cloud, as well as internet clouds support. They do consulting around code improvement and database development. They offer access to national cyber infrastructure especially for our engineering people who need computing abilities that are above and beyond what the institution can offer. And they offer consulting around programming. CAC has 2 representatives in CDS, their director, as well as another computational scientist contributes to CDS. And the Center for Advanced Computing also provides that ticketing system that I mentioned. I'm sorry about the slide. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, moving on, our CCSS. I mentioned there was this group called the Cornell Institute for Social and Economic Research. That's also a really big acronym, right? It was rebranded as the Cornell Center for Social Sciences a few years ago. And this is a group on campus that specifically focuses on social and economic research support. They are a lot like a library, but very specific disciplinary support. They offer access to social science data sets. They help especially with graduate students and learning analysis skills, in particular related to statistical software programs. So they teach a lot of workshops and do consultations. And they run their own social science archive. So we have an institutional repository in our library, but the CCSS runs a separate archive which allows restricted data to be shared. And it specifically shares data around social sciences. It doesn't accept all data sets. There are 2 members from CCSS in the CDS. They have a research associate and they have a data archivist who participates in CDS. And I don't think there's some of this is not on your slides. I'm sorry, I thought to add that at the last minute. I mentioned that the Weill Cornell Library is a part of CDS. Weill has different needs than Central Campus, primarily because they are handling human subjects data. So everything that we do needs to have another layer of security on top because they're handling medical data. And that's the primary difference between the work that we do in Ithaca and the support that they offer at Weill. But in many cases, the support is similar. They help people meet the university's retention policy, and Weill's, our medical school, Weill's campus, has a much stricter retention policy than the Ithaca campus. They have to keep their data for 6 years, not 3, and they have to register where that data is located. And the Ithaca campus doesn't have to do that. Our policy says, you have to share your data, and you have to share it in a good place, but you don't have to tell us where it is. But the medical school requires registration of those data sets. So the team at Weill helps our faculty do that. And like the Ithaca campus, they also work to support the creation of data management plans, especially as it relates to obtaining grants and funding money. Cornell Data Services also has the participation of our IT security office. I mentioned that Weill requires higher security than Ithaca does. So we actually have participation of 2 people from our security group, our university security group that participates in CDS. And this is really important because they are the people that help us evaluate, for example, data use agreements. They help support people who are doing international collaborations that have additional security requirements to them. They help people create data security plans and help set up systems that need additional security controls. I mentioned, though, that we are a virtual group. We don't have an office. We don't have a sign on a door anywhere that says Cornell Data Services. So the sign on our door is really our website. And so it's very important that we keep the information there up to date and as easy to read and find as we possibly can. This is the landing page of our website. And one of the tools that we offer at the website that is one of our most commonly accessed tools is our data storage finder. And I know I talked to a couple people about this already, but this is one of the things that was identified by those monthly meetings. The consultants got together and we shared, hey, someone came to me and they brought me this spreadsheet. This is the true story. This is how this came to be. They brought me a spreadsheet and said, here's what I think all the storage options are on campus. And here's what I think is important. Will you look at this and tell me if you think it's right? And I said, why do you do this? All this information is on the web. And they said, because in order to get this information, I have to go to 15 websites. And by the time I get to number 15, I forget what I read at number 1. So I want all this information in one spot. So I told that story at a monthly meeting, and 2 other consultants said, I also have heard that from faculty members, that they are frustrated by how long it takes to find information across Cornell's websites. So I wrote a proposal to our management council to get funding to develop a tool that pulls all of the storage options into one place. And this is what we ended up with. You can see that there are what we call cards on the right-hand side, those purple squares. Each of those is a storage service that is offered through Cornell University. And on the right-hand side, there are questions. And this allows a researcher to describe their situation and say, I need to be able to handle, for example, confidential data. I think the next screen has some of these checked. I'll go back so you can read the questions. So I need to handle confidential data. I am serving this information to the public on a website, and I can't afford to have that website go down. So I need replication. But I don't think that I'm going to get a lot more data. My data isn't going to be particularly big. And I don't need to be able to compute on it. But I do need to be able to add more data when I'm in the field, say in Antarctica. And I need to be able to collaborate with people out of campus, for example. So you can go through and you can check those questions. And then you can see that some of the storage options are faded out. And then you can select which ones are interesting to you and you want to learn more about. And then if you scroll down on the page, you get detailed information about those storage options, regardless of whether the library offers it, or CAC, or BRC, or whoever offers it. It doesn't matter. All this information is in one spot now. And you can see that we tried to make it visually easy for people to read and understand. So it is fully web accessible for screen readers, but also has icons for people who like to consume information in different ways. So they get information, for example, about whether or not they have protection against downtime and how well the system does at that. And it also describes what kind of data are allowed in each system. So remember, for example, WILE has much stricter requirements for HIPAA, et cetera. And then finally, again, it's about the people. So this is a self-service tool, but it's really important that if users have questions, they have the ability to find us and get additional answers. So this allows the researcher to email the results to themselves, or also email CDS and request a consultation. I mentioned that we offer lots of best practices. So here are a couple that are on the website, and you can see each of these have guidance underlying them. So for example, a lot of this seems very fundamental to some researchers, but it is really something that we're finding that a lot of students don't get instruction about. Basic understanding of what differences there are between file formats. If they are writing a paper and have to share the data, as you do in Japan as well, what are good formats to share that data in? So we encourage them to use open, non-proprietary formats, uncompressed formats, unencrypted, uncompiled, etc. So this kind of information we lay out on that website so people can consume it themselves. Similarly, we get a lot of questions about basic file management. How do I organize my stuff? And how do I get my students to organize their stuff? So we do a lot of instruction around both directory and file naming conventions. I can't tell you how many consultations I've had where someone actually comes in and says, Wendy, will you just look at my folders and tell me if you have a recommendation of how to do this better? Because sometimes faculty get so caught up in their worlds and how they are used to doing something that they can't see how it could be better. And so having an outside set of eyes come in and do that tends to be very helpful for people. And so we will go in and say, I don't even understand your research, but if I had to guess, I would want to group it this way. And we begin this conversation about how they can organize their content better and how they can make a naming scheme and or a data management plan that their entire lab can follow. We also support data management and sharing plans, writings, and, as I said, implementation. I'm not going to go into this slide in detail, but many of the federal agencies have very similar requirements for data management plans. And we have this content on our website where people can go into the different sections of a data management plan guidance and fill in what they need in order to submit that proposal. We also support this tool out of the California Digital Library called the DMP tool. It is an online interface, kind of like the data storage finder, where you can interact with it and you can say, I am applying to the Department of Energy under this call for proposals, and then the interface will prompt you for questions to answer. You type those answers in and you can export a rich text file of your data management plan. So some people like to do that self-service tool, and we've been able to customize the prompts in that tool for specific services at Cornell that would help the researcher. But most often, we get people that say, I have to turn in my proposal at 5 o'clock this afternoon, and I didn't know I had to write a DMP. And usually it's a Friday afternoon. So often what we do actually is just say, okay, we can do this. Show us what you have. Let's work together to write a data management plan. We don't like working with researchers at the last minute, but a lot of times they need that personal touch in order to meet their deadlines. And we do explain that if you had given us 3 weeks, we could help you a lot more, but we can help you. Many times we can help you in 3 hours, at least have something better than you would have if we had not helped you. We also get a lot of questions around data storage and backup practices. This is one of my favorite quotes. Digital information lasts forever, or 5 years, whichever comes first. We teach about the fact that archiving is not the same as backing up, that syncing to a cloud product is not the same as backing up. And we teach basic principles around things like the rule of 3, that you really should keep 3 copies on 2 different types of media, and one of them at least should be in a completely different place than the other things. And again, it's pretty simple, right? But it's the kind of information that when someone is feeling panicked about their research, it's very practical and it can be implemented pretty easily. We teach a lot about metadata, or we try to. Some of it is very basic, trying to tell people about the fact that metadata is simply a description of your data, and it can take many, many formats. It could be something as simple as describing the data or the file itself. How many lines of code does it, or how many variables does it have? How many descriptive elements does it have? How big is that file? What program do you need to open the file? There's also documentation or metadata that's at the study level. This is work on an NSF project that went to Antarctica, and I was on the Nathaniel Palmer on the cruise that ran in January of 1999, for example. And then there's also administrative metadata, and that's really more on the library side, but it's important for researchers to understand why we ask for this information. And generally, this helps us describe it in our system. So this is, for example, the metadata that we would put in our institutional repositories. These are just some cartoons that I love to use when I'm teaching with my students, and the realities of how people think they do their work and how they actually do their work. Are they putting into place good data management practices, or do they only just think they do? This idea of important or final version of a data set. We see this a lot of times. I'm going to skip over these, but if you want to come back and read about it, this is another mechanism we use to teach. Especially with graduate students, we try to not just spew information, which I kind of feel like I'm doing to you right now, but we try to give them scenarios so they can envision what a problem might look like down the road. And these are some examples that tend to be really useful for students. I mentioned that we do a lot of outreach. One of the mechanisms we do outreach with is a monthly newsletter. This month's newsletter focused on something that's happening in the United States right now. Our federal government is pushing something called gold standard science. And with all credit to the people at the University of Illinois, who I think some of you might have met already, we took those gold standard requirements and said, hey, here is how you meet them at Cornell. And in all likelihood, you're already meeting them. So that was the focus of this newsletter. And our newsletter distribution list is people who have signed up to get it. So it goes out right now to over 900 people on our campus once a month. We also do a lot of tabling events. So we've been around since 2011, and I still have people come up to me all the time and be like, this is great. I never knew you guys existed. I've been here 20 years. So there's always more opportunity to get the word out. There's new people coming in. There's people that didn't know they needed your help. And so we spend a few times a year doing tabling events all over campus. And this is Ileana. She is one of our digital humanists in the library. All that said, we don't do a lot of consulting. On average, we do about 80 consultations a year that come in through our email system, our ticketing system. There's a lot of other data support that goes on through these units directly, but this is how many people come in through that hub. I think there's a lot of people that use our website and use the self-service information that we provide. And we have hundreds of people that come to our instruction activities. So this is just a measure of our consultations. The green at the bottom of most of the bars, I didn't calculate it for a couple years there, I'm sorry, shows whether the consultation is about a data management plan or not. And you can see when CDS first started, we had a fair portion of our consultations were about this new requirement to write a data management plan. But proportionally, those requests have dropped, and we're getting more questions about how to implement those data management plans, not how to write them. So here is another look at that. Overall, in the last 5 years, we still are getting, if you take it topic by topic, we're still getting DMP questions. But we also get a lot of questions about sharing, and we get a lot of questions about general data management, data handling, data organization. That's that third bar that's there. And if you look at this across our different colleges, most of the people who are coming to CDS are from our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, our College of Arts and Sciences, and in particular, the physical sciences. So our physics, astronomy, and math departments are in the College of Arts and Sciences. We get a lot of questions that come in from our veterinarians. And finally, the fourth biggest user is our College of Engineering. I'm going to close up. I'm almost there. We're almost there. I'm going to close up with some challenges. So I mentioned that we are volunteers. Because of that, there are always going to be competing priorities. I have things that the library says are important to do, and I have to align those with my responsibilities as coordinator of Cornell Data Services. And because we are volunteers, in many ways, we don't have much power. We don't have the authority to enact big changes without the support of those higher up in the institution. So we are still thinking about how we can communicate those needs in a timely manner. We were successful with that data storage finder tool. We built that. It took almost a year, but we procured the money and the support to build that. But sometimes you need to move fast. And so how can we put structures within CDS to allow the consultants to make significant changes? And I mentioned that we don't have any physical space. We also have very little money. Anytime I need to build anything, anytime I need to create a poster for a session and I have to print it, I have to ask the management council for money. I get a very small budget once a year to spend on those kind of things. We also have, as you may have heard in the US, and probably here too, there's a lot of increasing regulation and policy from our federal funders. And those are putting pressure on our researchers. It takes more time. There's more administrative burden. And that is something that is completely out of our control, and we have to be able to respond to it. And those policy and regulations are creating a sort of tension between open and secure. And our university administration wants to be sure that we're following the rules. So they are very nervous about making sure that we are keeping things secure enough. And in many ways, we do support open, but we have to balance the needs for security with openness. And a lot of that is a mindset. It's us going out and saying, you can have things as open as possible, but as closed as necessary to meet the security requirements. The final challenge, I mentioned this already, is communication. How do we let people know that we exist? How do we get information about what their needs are? On the other hand, we've had a lot of successes. Because we are volunteers, we also are creative. We have some autonomy to decide what is information that needs to be on our website, and we have the ability to bring proposals upward. So in one sense, being volunteers is a challenge, but it also offers us some space to do things from the ground up rather than the top down. I think that Cornell was one of the first places to have a university-wide group, and we acknowledge the fact that the library or IT or any other group on campus can't and shouldn't have to do this alone. That we are in the business of research data management support as a team, and we're here to work together to share our expertise. CDS has created some content that's been very popular. That data storage finder has been used at over 30 institutions around the globe because we insisted on sharing the code that underlies that finder. If you go to the finder address, there's a GitHub link at the bottom, and other institutions can enact that. And ultimately, one of those strategies I mentioned at the very beginning is we are built on trust. We've provided a place for people from these different units to come together and talk about mistakes, talk about gaps in our services, and talk about how we can fill those gaps and support one another to create an ecosystem that is as complete as we possibly can get it around research data management. All right, so I went over, but my other talk is shorter, so we can blame it on Sarah. This is how you can reach me. This is how you can write to Data Help, or you can find any of our websites.
Wendy,
thank you very much for your talk. You have given a very rich presentation. Wendy has to prepare for the next presentation, but we would like to ask her to take a break. So maybe Ishita-sensei, can you give some comment? Wendy, thank you very much for your presentation. Let Wendy take a break. Maybe we can take a couple of questions. If you have any questions, we can take questions from the venue, or maybe those of you who are participating online, we can also entertain your question. We have an online question here. This is in English. So let me read out.
Does your DMSP and in the robust infrastructure behind it make it possible to analyze the pattern of the how Cornell dataset are reused, are in fair principle? すいません、今ちょっとごめんなさい、消えちゃったんでごめんなさい。By other researchers by the Cornell University and globally, similarly to how citation analysis is conducted for academic publications?
The answer is I wish. It is something that we have thought a lot about, especially as librarians. We like to help people know how their data are being reused. Unfortunately, our systems right now are not optimized for counting reuse. So a data set is shared in a repository, and in most cases, they get a persistent identifier, a DOI, or a handle, something that we can track. But we have no perfect means of finding how those are being reused. And part of that, I think, is that as researchers, we aren't citing data as well as we're citing papers. We think about giving credit in the introduction of the paper, the background, to all the people who've done similar work before us, right? And we cite those papers, but we don't always cite those data sets. So I think until researchers get better at citing data in their references, the way they cite papers, we are always going to underestimate how much data sets are being reused. So some of it is a technical problem, we can't find them. Some of it is a social problem because researchers aren't necessarily citing data sets.
ありがとうございます。では、
Thank you very much. We have another question from Professor Tomiura. In your talk, you talked about a ticket system. This is your slide number 10. There is a mention of ticketing system. Could you elaborate and tell us what this is?
Sure. You probably are using them here too. It is a system that allows people to email one address, but respond in the system. We can assign that email to a consultant so that they handle it, and the system records the email messages that go back and forth so that the consultant doesn't have it in their private email. It goes into the system and we have a record of it. All the attachments are saved there, and it allows us to record metadata. How long did they work with the person? What was the subject of the consultation? What department was this person from? What was it that you actually did for them? Did you meet them in person or did you Zoom with them? Those kind of things are all tracked in that system. And then the reason that it's interesting is because I don't know how your universities work, but Cornell, of course, the library uses one ticketing system, and CAC uses a different brand, and IT uses a third brand. But CDS has people from all those places. So we had to have a central ticketing system that allowed people from different organizations to access it. So that became very important. And it was essentially a donation of the Center for Advanced Computing to allow us to use and have a queue in their ticketing system.
はい、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. It really wasn't a break for you, Wendy, but maybe later on we can entertain more questions from you. So why don't we move on to the next lecture? May we? Would that be okay with you?